Hello, my name is Barry Wiss, certified wine educator and president of the Society of Wine Educators. Food and wine pairing. Some things just go together, like peanut butter and jelly, Han Solo and Chewie, and yin and yang. Food's constant companion has always been wine, and vice versa. The two are inseparable, linked at the hip, bound forever. You get the point. On their own, most people find wine and food approachable. Food more so than wine, but no one we know has ever feared a glass of Chardonnay. But when you pair food and wine together, people's pulses start to race. A look of mild panic takes over. So we're here to squash all of that. Eating food and drinking wine should be a pleasurable experience, not a stress-inducing one. And it's highly personalized. So the absolute rule for food and wine pairing? Eat and drink what you like. If it tastes good to you, then it's a good pairing. However, there are some food and wine pairing basics that will save you from minor disasters. But before we get to those fundamentals, here's a little history. In places such as France, Italy, and Spain, food and wine evolved together for hundreds of years. So people ate and drank regionally. The notion of food and wine pairing didn't exist. It just naturally happened. But here in the United States, we're a melting pot of cultures with cuisine that borrows flavors from around the world. So we can get what we want when we want it, whether it's blueberries in the middle of winter or pad thai at 2 a.m. All of this begs us to be a tad more knowledgeable when it comes to pairing food and wine. Now, if you take anything away from our mini lecture, remember that food and wine pairing is all about taste balance. And this is exactly what it sounds like, the balance of taste. So how do we achieve this magical thing called taste balance? First, you need to understand something you probably already know. The dominant taste of anything you eat or drink will affect what follows. What do we mean by this? Imagine yourself getting ready in the morning. You take a shower, brush your teeth, get dressed, and then grab some breakfast. You pour yourself a nice tall glass of orange juice. Before that glass even touches your lips, you're probably thinking, this is a bad idea. If not, try it. The orange juice will taste super sour. Why? Because it's the dominant sweetness in the toothpaste emphasizing the dominant sourness or acidity in the orange juice. A successful food and wine pairing won't wreak havoc on your poor taste buds like this. Instead, it'll work to minimize that change, or even better, make your mouth happy. Everything should be in balance. Think of it as simply adding an additional ingredient to your recipe, but you're doing it in your mouth. So you should be familiar with the primary taste of sweet, sour, salt, and bitter. A relative newcomer to the scene is umami, or savory, which is kind of hard to wrap your head around without experiencing it. Luckily, you probably have. Foods that are high in umami are things like braised or aged meat, mushrooms, fish, soy sauce, shellfish like lobsters and oysters, and of course, snack foods. Why snack foods? Because those geniuses at the snack food companies know that umami is something we crave. It's that yummy taste that we can't quite put our finger on. So adding it to snack foods in the form of hydrolyzed protein is what keeps you snacking away. Bet you can't eat just one. So back to the 5 dominant tastes in food. These will affect the taste of wine. The key word here is dominant. Think beyond the main ingredient in the dish to how it's prepared. Are you making a spicy chicken curry? Or a grilled chicken with a sweet mango barbecue sauce? Hint, hint, the dominant taste in these dishes is not chicken. Figuring out the dominant taste in foods is like playing matchmaker with your friends. You'll consider their personalities when deciding whether the two might hit it off or not, right? Wine and food are no different. When you're trying to pair food and wine, you need to consider the components of each. Figure out what the dominant taste is and use that to guide you. Now, like we said earlier, everyone's taste buds are slightly different. But generally, foods that are salty or sour will make a wine taste milder, sweeter, fruitier, less acidic, less tannic, or even less bitter. Take a grilled steak topped with a hunk of salty blue cheese. This dish would go well with a young Cabernet, which will seem softer and less tannic because of the dominant flavor of the dish. Sweet foods, or foods high in umami, or that savory yum factor, will make wines taste stronger, drier, less fruity, more acidic, more tannic, or maybe even more bitter. Imagine biting into a slice of cake with a sweet buttercream frosting and washing it down with a sip of dry red wine such as Merlot. If you haven't done this at a wedding, try it. The super sweet cake will make the wine seem bitter and dull. Surely not a match made in heaven. Another pairing that will do this, spicy foods like habanero peppers and high alcohol tannic wine. Habaneros are hot enough on their own, but try these together and you'll think you just swallowed fire. A better pick for spicy foods are slightly sweeter wines, like a Gewürztraminer or Moscato, which will diminish the perception of the heat with the sweetness. Going back to natural pairings, people often think that cheese and wine go hand in hand, and for the most part they do. But because you generally don't alter cheese, meaning that you serve it the way you purchased it, here are some handy pairing tips. Cheese is generally young and fresh or aged and dry. Fresh young cheeses are savory and sweet with high milk sugars, so they go well with softer wines, such as Chardonnay or Riesling. These are harder to pair with strong wines. Think of how a Petite Sirah would pair with a fresh goat cheese. Aged cheeses are higher in salt and acid and go well with a wider variety of wines, from mild to strong, which makes for easy pairings. And a cheese like Reggiano Parmigiano, also known as the king of cheese, is your go-to superstar. It goes well with almost every wine. Now, if you're in a pinch, here's a couple of food and wine pairing tips to fall back on. 1, pair like with like. So big with big and delicate with delicate. Red wines with red meat and white wines with white meats. 2, mirror flavors or contrast them. This can be hit or miss, so best to try these types of pairings before the in-laws arrive or among friends. So there you have it. To briefly review, the notion of food and wine pairing is a relatively new concept. People used to simply drink and eat regionally, so there wasn't a need to think about how wine might pair with food. But we live in a melting pot of cultures and cuisines, so a little more thought about what we eat and drink together makes for happier pairings. Generally, the goal in food and wine pairing is to achieve taste balance. We can do this by identifying the dominant taste of a dish: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami or savory, and pairing wine to that dominant taste. Generally, salt and sour taste in foods will make wines taste milder, sweeter, fruitier, and less acidic, tannic, and maybe even less bitter. Sweet and savory taste in foods will make wines seem stronger, drier, less fruity, more acidic, tannic, and bitter. Because cheese and wine are so often paired together, remember that fresh young cheeses are harder to pair because of their high milk sugars and umami, and generally go well with milder wines. Aged cheeses are easier to pair as they go well with mild to strong wines. If all else fails, Pair like with like bodies. Big wines with big foods. Lighter wines with lighter foods. But experiment and see what pairings work for you. Start with foods that are easy to identify the dominant taste, and experiment, experiment, experiment. You'll know you've achieved taste balance when both the food and the wine remain unchanged or have been improved. Now for our little quiz. Food and wine pairing is a relatively new concept. Why? Because people used to eat and drink regionally. Food and wine pairing is all about what? Taste balance. What is the newest of the 5 primary tastes? Umami or savory. A high alcohol, tannic wine would pair best with which dish? Filet mignon. What type of wine would go best with fresh, young cheese? Riesling. I hope you enjoyed learning about food and wine pairing. Cheers.